Hey, what's up, class? So, our assignment for this week is going to be working with ink wash. It's very similar to watercolor, and we're going to be drawing fruit. So, this is going to be a demo for that. To start, just want to show you I have a full jar of just clean water, clean water, a smaller container, glass or something plastic works. If you clean it off right away after you use it, it's not gonna stain the glass. And then in this smaller container, I have about 5 or 6 drops of ink so that it's just light enough to see. Kind of like when you do really light strokes when you start a drawing to sketch out the drawing. And then over here I have something like 10 or 15 drops in just a small amount of water. So you can see it's not very much. It's not pure ink. It's diluted with water plus 10 or 15 drops of ink. Okay? So you guys are also, since you already know proportion now, you're going to be graded on how proportional everything looks, in addition to whether or not the values are correct, and your ink wash technique. Okay, so first let me map out this drawing. I'm going to draw just a line for the table. And notice again, I know I repeat this all the time, but I'm using the side of my pencil and holding it further back here so that I don't create these harsh lines, especially with the ink, because once you go over it a few times, you're not going to be able to erase it. Okay, so then I'm going to, this is about the bottom of the first bell pepper. Just kind of block that in really roughly. And then there's one behind it. You can see the top of it a little bit. Comes out kind of like that, and it's further back. Remember, the trick to knowing when something is further back in a drawing, not a photo obviously, but in a drawing, is if the bottom of it is higher than the bottom of the thing in front of it. So this one is in front, that means the bottom of it is a little bit lower. This one's behind it, so the bottom's going to be up higher and the top is going to be much higher as well if they're the same shape. Okay, then the third bell pepper, it goes into that second one a little bit, and it looks more, it's shaped, there's like a, it's more circular here, and then it comes down, and the bottom of it, this side of it is closer to us, so the bottom of it is a little bit lower than the end of it over here, the left side that is. And then it has a little curve that goes up, and that's behind that. Okay, next let's break down the shape even further and map out the shadows. So there's a shadow there, there's a main shadow very dark here. And remember, I say it over and over, but I can't say it enough. It's about drawing the shapes of the shadows. That's how you get that kind of accuracy and that three-dimensionality. So I'm breaking down the values that I'm seeing. The values always first. And over here, there's a dark shadow like that. And with ink especially, you wouldn't necessarily do this with drawing so much, but with ink you really want to just really highlight, just really lightly draw in where the highlights are going to go, because that is where the ink wash will not go. So over here there's like a little sliver right there. I'll make sure that when I paint over this, that I skip past or paint around the white shapes. Okay? right, so now that I have the basic shapes blocked in, I'm going to go ahead and apply a wash over the entire surface, including the background, except for where it's white, which means I have to be really careful about where my highlights were that I drew. And I'm also going to continually look up constantly at the picture to make sure that I'm not missing anything or I didn't do something inaccurately. Okay, it's very, very light, so I don't even know if you'll be able to tell the difference on the on the video. Okay, so starting with the fruit, using the tip to go around the highlighted areas, and then when I do that, I'm noticing that there's a buildup of ink there, so I just kind of sweep it away like that. Again, looking up at the photo, covering the whole area, going around the highlights with the tip of my brush. And it's getting a little raggedy, so I'm going to dip it in the ink again and kind of focus on the tip, and I'm going to just sort of roll and kind of scrape against the rim of the container so that I get my nice point again. So I'm going to keep going around the highlights, sweeping the ink away from where it's building up too much. Okay, I'm going to take another dip, move on to the next object, and up here, this whole side is pretty dark, except for that little highlight. And over here, go around the highlight again. And then the rest is in shadow, so I don't have to worry about avoiding it. This first step is pretty simple. Okay, onto this bell pepper. Let's see, let me make sure that I avoid these highlights here. Using the tip of my brush and going around the highlights. Okay, on the stem there's a sliver of a highlight right in the middle there, so I'll skip over that. But the rest is slightly darker. Okay, and then I'm going to continue onto the background, going right up to that edge. The background will end up being really, really dark later. And the doily, there's only two places where it looks pretty white to me, but it's not even pure white, so I'm just going to go over the whole thing with this light wash. Okay, and that is layer one. So as you can see, it's very, very light. If you didn't actually see me do it, you wouldn't even know. And right now the camera is showing you it's the shininess of the paper where there's where there's water on it. But in reality, let me see if I can change this angle to show you. So that's more what it looks like. And my video stopped, so I actually have a second layer on the fruit. I had started that, and then the video got interrupted, so That's why that fruit looks just a tiny bit darker, because there's actually 2 layers on it now. Okay, so now I'm gonna let it dry for maybe 10 minutes and come back to it. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. I'm gonna try to go in with my pencil clicky eraser now and try to erase those lines around the highlight. Because at this point you can still sort of erase. I'm not going to erase it completely because I want to just make sure that the next layers I put on, I'll probably erase it completely after the next layer. But right now I just want to make sure that I can still see those highlights clearly so that I can go around it. Okay. So now I'm still not going to... Oh, before I move on, I wanted to make sure you know that you should never leave your brush with the ink dry on it. If you're ever, you go to the bathroom or you're going to take a break from the drawing, leave it in the clean water. Just leave your brush sitting in the clean water. All right? Okay, so I'm still not going to move into the dark ink yet. I'm still just going to continue to put darker and darker layers on with the light ink wash. And since the yellow is so much lighter in value than the red and the orange, I think I'm going to leave it for now. Maybe just put the cast shadow in it. But the other 2 peppers I'm going to go over again. Being careful again to not go over those highlights. Working around them so that they stay white as possible, as white as possible. Okay, so there's that one. And this orange one, I believe this is going to be the last overall wash I put on it because it's slightly lighter than the red. Avoiding the highlights. Okay. So now what I will do to the yellow pepper is I'm going to, still with the light ink wash, put in this cast shadow here. And while these dry, I'm going to go ahead and with my really dark ink, fill my brush with it and fill in the black background. Just get it a little bit darker. And use my brush to go around the peppers, trying not to touch. See where I touched where it was wet? It bled into the pepper, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go just right up to the edge, but not over into where it's wet. So using the side of my brush to cover more area. And take another dip. Get my tip on there really close. You can see where it's wet, and where I touch it, the water attracts itself, so it's sucking the new ink into it. And sweep outward. going here. Ooh, there it goes again. I'm getting too close to it. Uh-oh, you see that? But that's okay. I caught it in time. I'm going to take a paper towel right now and just dab it. There we go. So it won't be too dark later. And for the purposes of the camera, I can't move my paper, but don't forget that you guys can move your paper. Turn it, rotate it so that it's more comfortable for you to make broader strokes. I'm going to get my brush wet and go around this area again because it dried really quickly and I don't want streaks. Okay, I'm going to do the same for below down here. There's the doily. So I'm outlining as I go because I want to be able to blend out the little streaks. And again, as I mentioned last class, what was I saying? Okay, so that is in there. I'm going to go ahead and paint in this cast shadow as well. It goes all the way to the edge. And the cast shadow here as well. But my brush is starting to get raggedy, so I'm going to get it a little wet just on the tip. Not in the clean water, in the lighter value water. And then I'm going to dip it again in the super dark value. Kind of roll the brush against the rim so it gets into a nice point. And I'm going to, as carefully as I can, come in here and get this dark shadow in here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, let's see, I'm going to test, since I know that this part right here is going to be almost black, I'm just going to test the wetness. Okay, so it's dry enough to where I can apply a layer of really dark value where that shadow goes. This dark shadow here. And then I'm going to wipe my brush a little bit, dip it in some clean water, and kind of blend the edge because it's a little bit fuzzy. And while I'm there, I think I'm going to go ahead and go one more layer. on the dark side. Okay, that part needs to be darker as well down here. And again, you can't see me, but I'm constantly, like right now, I'm looking at the photo more than I am at the object. Let's get this darker. And right here, I'm okay with it being kind of fuzzy like that because that's sort of what the shadow looks like. So I'm gonna let it just bleed out like that. Not so much this one. And since I'm here, I'm gonna go ahead and put in that dark shadow that I see there. And there's a really dark shadow here. And just like I did over here, I'm gonna wet my brush in the clean water, wipe it off a little bit, and I'm gonna kind of blend it out so that it's not such a harsh line. Okay. I'm gonna keep going with the super dark values. There's a dark shadow here. And one here. And it wraps around slightly. I'm just barely using the tip of my brush and I'm rotating it. So, because sometimes when you press down like this, it bends. So if you want to use the point, you're going to turn it the other way. Okay, and that stem is very dark as well. I'm just going to straighten my brush. And let's see, looking at the photo, this whole side gets to be almost black. And then there are some black lines. Not totally black, but just darker lines there. Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. Well, one more little thing right here. I'm going to leave that alone and move on to the yellow where I see that there is really dark values. This whole side of this stem is pretty dark. And then there's like a circle within a circle here. Okay, I'll leave that alone. Move on to these creases here. This is where I'm really glad that I did a good drawing, because you don't want to have to correct your proportions in the middle of applying the ink. And then there's a really thin black line there. Okay. Now I'm going to work on the cast shadow on this pepper. On the yellow one, I mean. And yes, notice how I'm overlapping onto the previous dark shadow that I had made because it actually needs to be darker. Okay. And let's see, is this part a little bit more dry? I'm gonna go back into the lighter value, water, stir it up a bit because it's been a while, and wipe it off with my brush so it's not sopping wet. And I'm gonna go over this part of the cast shadow one more time with that lighter value. Okay. All right, on to the next pepper. I'm gonna give my super dark ink a swirl, just with the tip, not the whole brush. Roll it on the rim to get it a little bit sharper. Okay, so here's where the challenge is gonna be for me. This is gonna be really dark right here. I have to really be careful and not get it the wrong shape, because once you apply this really dark value with ink, there's no going back. And again, the nice thing about the Sumi brush is it can take a lot of abuse and still maintain its shape when you want to maintain that shape. Okay, and there's kind of a line there. I'm gonna keep going. There. It's a shadow here. And down here, it gets a little bit dark, but it's not that dark. So I'm gonna kind of dilute my brush a little bit in the lighter value water, and I'm gonna touch that dark shadow that I just made and kind of sweep it along. And I'm going to use that same water on my brush to blend out this a little bit so the edge isn't so hard. While also copying the shape. Okay, so now this whole side of the stem is very, very dark. So I'm going to overlap onto that. And the fine little details that I see on like the base of that stem, I'm going to leave for the very end. Always leave the details for last. You always want to go general to specific. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone for now. Let's move on to the doilies shadows. What I'll do is I will dip it first in the light value water, wipe some of it off, wipe it off, but I'm going to make it really, I'm going to try to get my brush to be sort of raggedy. So maybe take my fingers and go like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and dip it in that darker value, and I'm just going to stipple this shadow in. Like so. Same thing over here. And while my brush is raggedy like this, I think I'm going to go and get some of that tabletop as well. Get that kind of rough wood texture in there. Same thing over here. So then while the fruit is drying, I'm going to actually put in the black, apply another layer of black to the background. So I'm gonna go back to my really dark value ink and come on the other side of the table here so I can work upside down since I'm working on the top. I want this to be super black. You don't want to outline it and let it dry. If you want to get rid of the streaks, then kind of outline as you go. Get that edge first, like this. Do a little section like that, and then sweep it out. I'm running out of ink, so I'm about to have to refill it in a second here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour my cleaner water into this ramekin away from the drawing. Oops, that's a little too much. And I'm gonna put about 15 drops, not squirts, about 15 drops of ink. So let's see. That was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Just one more. Okay, then I'm going to stir it with my brush. And I'm going to keep going. Oh, what? It's not dark at all. Okay. I'm going to add 15 more, so double what I had. 15 more drops.